So what I want to do is move into the agenda and talk about the recent elections that took place in Burlington for the city council races. I'll let Josh introduce that panel to us, and each one will talk for a couple of minutes, and then hopefully we'll have time for a couple of questions there as well. So Josh, you want to take it away?
Yeah. So again, thanks so much for everyone for joining us. So we thought going into the 2020 election cycle, it would be really interesting for folks to hear about some of our really big wins from town meeting day. The recap is that we won a historic majority on city council for the picking up 2 seats, unseating 2 incumbent state representatives and or city councilors and 1 incumbent school board member. So really exciting wins from Max Tracy, Zariah Hightower, Aden Haji, and Jane Stromberg. So we wanted to kind of give them a little bit of time to introduce themselves because they're all, other than Max, are pretty new to the party, at least on the state committee level. And we might have a little bit of time for questions, but we were hoping everyone could talk for maybe like 5 minutes or so first and just talk about their experience winning these races, what it looked like, and what they're hoping to accomplish. So Aden, you want to?
Josh, before we start, could I just remind people that they should try to use the active speaker mode on their screens? They don't want to see the person on the panel who's doing speaking.
That's right. So you should see in the top right corner of your screen an option to go to speaker view. And that's a preference for this. I'm going to switch that for the YouTube stream so people can see who's talking. So that's good. So Aden, I'm going to unmute you.
Thanks, Josh. My name is Aden Haji, and I just recently got elected to the Burlington School Board. And I went up against an incumbent, and it was a good experience overall. I want to thank the Progressive Party for all their help. I felt really supported, and even though school board is a nonpartisan governance, it definitely helped to be able to identify, as a progressive, but while keeping in mind that it's nonpartisan. And I feel like the whole experience, I had the opportunity to learn about what it means to run a campaign, and as well as connect with all of the community members in my area, my constituents, and see the needs and the issues that they have regarding the school district. And I felt like it's important to have a voice on the school board. So being in Ward 8 definitely gave me, I feel like, an edge, because I also graduated from UVM last year. So I felt like it's easier for me to connect with the constituents, since it's mostly college students. And I had a really huge support from people, especially Jane Stromberg and Mark Hughes. He was there with me knocking doors, and a lot of other community members too. I'm really grateful for. And I know that this is only the beginning of the process of the movement, and I'm really glad to be a part of it. So, yeah.
Thanks, Aden. So I'm going to go right in and invite, I think Jane is on. Let's see. Yep, it looks like Jane is on. So we'll invite Jane Stromberg to speak right now. Okay. And Jane, I believe, was the youngest woman ever elected to city council in Burlington. That's my understanding. So it's really excited. And Aden, I should also say, I think you, we said you're the first ever new American ever elected to city council or to school board. That's kind of a very exciting thing.
I think Aden also might be the youngest. I don't have proof of that, but definitely in the recent future. All right, and then is this active speaker for me or no? Did I change it?
I think you should be on active speaker right now.
Okay, cool. All right, awesome. Here's a big picture of my face. So hello, everyone. It's very surreal to be here in this kind of I don't know, during this time, it's nice to see everybody. And also it's, it's kind of unreal for me to be in this position here talking to you, but I am so honored to have it. And I want to just introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Jane Stromberg. I ran in Ward 8 in Burlington, which is kind of the student hybrid long-term resident Hills section-ish area. And I was a first-time candidate. I ran on a climate activist, housing, and social justice platform. Those are things that have been important to me throughout my studies at UVM, for which I graduated in 2019. And yeah, so I am now the city councilor for that district, and it's very interesting to get acclimated to that, especially during a time like this. COVID-19 has definitely thrown us right into the game. But yeah, we had a successful campaign, and in terms of success, I don't mean just winning. I mean, we had a very cohesive, respectful team with a lot of, open communication. We prioritized having, a real heaviness on being inclusive and actually cultivating leaders to become involved in the Progressive Party, but also just in local politics, which is something that isn't as, I don't think it has the to us, we're all kind of geeks around that, but I think in general, people don't focus on their local politics as much. And I think it's so imperative that folks get involved, and especially at a young age where the development of people's kind of ideologies are so important. So I'm very proud to obviously be a progressive. I've been a progressively minded person my whole life. So it's nice to kind of find this niche and be able to join, forces with you all. But yeah, we had a lot of goals for our campaign, and a lot of that was in regards to, building the movement. It wasn't just about winning. I went into it thinking it could go either way, and I really prepared myself for any type of outcomes, especially because I'm a human being. I have emotions, and I'll feel the way I feel. But I think that it was more so, how are we bringing awareness to the issues? And so if I had any piece of advice for anyone like running for anything ever, just maintain your focus on the issues, because no matter what, you will be successful. You are building what is so meaningful to all of us, and that is so incredibly important. So yeah, and I do want to thank like DSA and RAD and all of you. Like this whole win is because of every single one of you getting involved at some point during any of those races, having input, volunteering. There's so many pieces of energy that built up to this, and I really appreciated it. So yeah, and then a lot of the priorities going forward for me are obviously climate crisis based. So I'm focused on divestment, and that's in regards to the city's pension fund and UVM, and fair free transit, and a focus on a lot of the new construction and how we can be efficient with that. And then also lately, well, this was a priority during the campaign, but rent control, tenants' rights, and that kind of thing. But lately, I've been getting so many emails and phone calls about that, specifically because a lot of people are not able to pay their rent. A lot of people are feeling threatened by a lot of the larger landlords in our area. And that's, I'm a renter. I identify with that. And so it's this crisis has highlighted a lot of issues for us. So I think that it's a really important time to get involved with politics in general, but especially with the fact that a lot of issues are highlighted. So yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jane. So next up, I wanted to introduce Zariah Hightower, and I should say for both Jane and Zariah, they both knocked every door in their districts. I believe Zariah about 2.5 times knocked every door in the district, and Jane maybe 8 times. It's a much smaller ward, but they really, really showed what a progressive campaign looks like when you're spending all your time going out door knocking, talking to potentially new voters, registering people, bringing new people out. And the opposition in all of these campaigns really had a much more direct mailer centric approach. So it was really exciting. So yeah, I'm gonna introduce Zariah Hightower. And Zariah, like I said, knocked every door in her district over 2 times, ran an incredibly exciting campaign. She's also, I believe, the first woman of color ever elected to the city council. So very historic on that level, and has just been a tremendous councilor since she joined us just a few short months ago. So Zariah, if you want to tell us a little bit about your race.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm sure my face is new to a lot of you because I'm extremely new to the Progressive Party, fairly new to Vermont. I moved to Burlington in 2016 and found myself in a fairly progressive hub. I wasn't really someone who historically paid a lot of attention to national or to state politics, but I did really love cities and therefore paid attention to city policies. And soon enough, politics. In 2018, I joined the Development Review Board here in Burlington, where I was welcomed as kind of a pillar of diversity. I was minority, I was female, I was a renter, and in my 20s. And it took me a few months to understand that this singularity would be true in my perspectives just as much as in my identity. And at the DRB, I over and over again saw that we tended to approve projects designed by distinguished architects, but less so those for small homeowners with hand-drawn plans. Every board member I thought was a kind and thoughtful person, but in my opinion, they were kind of stuck in a paradigm that expensive ideas were good and other ideas were kind of bad. And never mind that when I resigned from the DRB 2 months ago to take my position on city council instead, I left the 9-member board as the only person who wasn't a developer or an attorney. And more than that, I left it as the only female. So feel like there's progress that needs to be made. Burlington, like most cities, is a place of inequality, better than most that I've lived in, but that bar is kind of low. So last year I went to Detroit to the People's Convention, and it really showed me and highlighted for me just how united we are in our asks, really all across the country, but how so many of our representatives are unable to really hear us because of the paradigms that I think they're stuck in. And so back last fall in Burlington, after months of controversy, I really wanted to see more oversight of the police department. I wanted to see radical change to our transportation system. I wanted to see changes in our parking and our housing policies to move toward a carbon neutral future. And I thought that my representative, who again was a kind and thoughtful person, but had been in place for 30 years, just was not calling for, or in some cases even allowing some of the changes that I wanted to see. Which is why I ran. And to Jane's point, I think it was just successful just in how we ran more than me winning. My amazing campaign manager managed to wrangle 30 volunteers, a mix of old hats who had worked on previous progressive campaigns with 10 times as much experience as I had, as well as people who had never done anything political before. My social media manager had never worked on a campaign. My data manager had never worked on a campaign. Dozens of people had never volunteered on a campaign, knocked on doors, made calls, wrote postcards. And so, yeah, I was really proud of our success to not just knock every door twice, minus the ones who said, do not knock on my door again. But also I personally knocked every door in my ward's low income housing neighborhoods where the other 2 campaigns didn't even send a single representative. And then was lucky enough to win, I think, because of the way that we ran with more than half of the votes in a 3-way race. And so now the hard work begins, and I'm so incredibly lucky and so grateful to have 6 progressive colleagues, but they're not enough. I feel like over and over again, I hear the administration and some of the others on the council saying, that's not possible, or you can't do that. They acknowledge that the systems we find ourselves in are unjust, unfair, and equitable, from being racist to sexist and homophobic, but they also ironically seem equally horrified at our attempts at any kind of reform. And so I think we need help. I'm sure that my state colleagues feel the same way as they face reports put out by lobbyists with more resources than we have. We need the help of activist groups to separate fact from fiction as we try to make radical change in the way government works and who it works for. We need people to run who aren't part of the paradigm, so we need to recruit. I'm sure all of you know this better than I do as someone who's so new, but I'm so incredibly grateful for how the Progressive Party really embraced me as a complete newcomer, and really want to say thank you to all of you. And I hope you join me in trying to build the movement and the party with lots of new faces.
Thanks a lot, Soraya. So next up, our last panelist for this, and then I hope we'll have time for maybe just a couple questions, is Max Tracy. And Max is somebody who has been with the party for quite a while. He's been a city councilor for many years. And just to kind of illustrate how far we've come, just a few short years ago, I know Max would regularly take votes that were like 11-1, with Max being like the one person, voting no or voting yes for a bill. And now he's a city council president. So it really kind of shows what we can do when we really work hard and we have a strong focus and go out and organize our neighborhoods for progressive change. So Max, take it away.
Thanks, Josh, and thanks to all the other panelists for their wonderful thoughts. Those are just some amazing reflections on what was a really historic victory for our campaign this past March. And I just want to sort of put it into context because, like Josh said, I've been on the city council for the last 8 years, having gotten involved at a time, at least initially, when the progressives were at a real low point. And I think that as exciting as this moment is, it's also important for us to remember and just give tremendous appreciation to all the people who stuck with this party when we were at our lowest point. I look at, for instance, Emma and, Martha and others on this call who stuck with it. And, Josh talked about being, one of the only ones. Well, Emma was one of 2 progressives on the council who stuck it out during really hard times. So we really need to recognize not only that this is exciting, but also that came from people really sticking with it, even when it was hard, and that we have to stick with it when it's hard, because that can lead to victories later on, and take the long view, I guess is what I mean to say. So I just want to just give a shout out to all of that. And then to say that also that a lot of these victories were the result also of people building strong mentorship relationships between different folks and welcoming new voices, but really being willing to also step back and say, I've had my time. I've done a lot on this. I want to teach you as a newcomer how you can do this as yourself and pass on that knowledge. And so I think that that's crucial to remember too, is that if you have knowledge, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the person to run yourself, but that you can really support these new candidates and these new voices in really exciting ways. And I thought we saw a lot of really cool mentorship happening in this particular council race or this election season that was incredibly helpful. In terms of some things that I saw that were different or unique about this particular race, or why this race turned out like it did, I think that just in terms of broader context, we have a situation where in Burlington, I'm sure many of you being political junkies follow sort of the different things that happen, but we in Burlington have a mayor who has embraced a very neoliberal agenda when it comes to things like development, wanting to see deregulation and embrace market-driven policies in order to really try and benefit folks who by and large are already doing okay for themselves. And so that has resulted in a number of decisions, namely things like City Place, which is the mall redevelopment that where they basically gave away way too much to developers, gave them what they wanted, and what that's left us with is a hole in the ground. And that was a particularly motivating issue for the voters that I spoke to. I think, just as Soraya was also mentioning, police reform has become a huge issue in Burlington in the past year, with a variety of different issues happening, whether it was violence against men of color in the community or the social media scandals that emerged. Those were also motivating factors for voters that really, I think, helped to drive that progressive message in some senses. But that sort of broader context was not enough. It really took our organizing efforts to make that happen. And when I say organizing efforts, I mean actually getting out, like Josh was saying, that door knocking, that we all did over and over and over again in communities. For me, it was a little different than for some of the new candidates, in the sense that I'm going back to already established relationships in a lot of cases, though I live in a district, in a ward that turns over quite frequently. So there are always a lot of introductions in a campaign. So again, that door knocking piece is crucial. And I think we saw that because, my opponent didn't get started door knocking until, later on in the race. He tended to, and this is something that we saw largely from our Democratic opponents, was there was a coordinated, centralized strategy that was funded through developer money, many thousands of dollars, in fact, more money than we've ever seen in city council races, largely from folks who have a lot of money, and were donating thousands of dollars into these campaigns, which were then used to funnel into direct mailers. And I had never seen anything like this in terms of direct mailers. I saw maybe 4 or 5, 6 pieces going just into my ward alone. And that had me pretty worried, honestly. I did basically one lit drop and that was it, wanting to really conserve on paper. I felt like if I'm talking about climate crisis, I shouldn't be throwing tons of paper at voters. So that was something that was interesting and it had me a little nervous. But again, it's just important to remember that nothing makes up for human contact. Nothing makes up for that, putting in the time yourself and engaging with voters. Another change that I saw in terms of this election that was interesting, or that was a shift, was also that we saw less viability, or less going into less responsiveness to phone calling or phone banking. People just aren't answering the phones anymore. So texting becomes much more of a strategy, or a thing that we do, and our opponents used it as well. So that was something that was a shift, or something that we saw as being different in terms of our races. And then another interesting and really positive change that I think was influential in these races was the coming together of a variety of non-political party groups in support of our candidacies. And by that I mean we had, and I say we because I think all of us got endorsements from groups like Sunrise, which is a climate justice movement coming out of UVM. We had DSA,
Max,
Democratic Socialists. Yeah.
Max, a couple of minutes left, just a reminder.
Okay, yep.
Sorry.
And then we also had groups like Rights and Democracy also providing a lot of sort of on the ground, like they provided a phone banking space for us as an endorsement. So in addition to organized labor support. So we saw, and that was something that I really hadn't seen in council races in years prior. So all of those factors were some of the differences that I saw in this race. But again, just want to emphasize the fact that we also, that so much of this came from really putting in the time and doing that direct voter contact from door knocking. So that's something that I think we need to continue to build off of. I think it's going to be really challenging this fall, given that it's not clear as to whether we'll be able to do a whole lot of door knocking. We'll have to figure out different ways of generating meaningful contact with folks. But again, that seemed to be decisive in these races.
Thanks a lot, Max. Marielle, do we have time for questions? A couple of questions. Oh, sorry. Do we have time for a couple of questions, Marielle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Sorry, I thought you heard me.
Great. Yeah, so I saw one question. I see Frank has his hand up, and there's one question from Frank. So I'm just going to read his comment, and maybe we can you can address this. So what the question is, what are we going to do to transcend door knocking when we can no longer door knock? So does anyone, obviously your campaigns were really heavily focused on door knocking, but do you have any thoughts on like what, and any ideas for kind of candidates who are announcing soon or have already announced and are gearing up for their campaign, like different ideas? Does someone want to quickly address that?
So one thought that comes to mind, and this is something that Emma taught me, was about like postcard writing, like handwritten postcards. And I know that's still like a handwritten thing, so people may feel a little weird about mail, but still, like, that's a way to personalize an email, or give that personal touch to voters, especially if it's someone that you already know. But another strategy can be to engage folks in your district and ask them to write to folks who they know as well. Again, that can be a strategy to just create direct, meaningful contact with people and make them feel like you value their perspective. So that's just one idea, but I don't know if others have anything else.
Anyone else want to address that?
No, I actually had the same thing. I've been advocating for postcards because I think those are quite effective. And then I think just being better about having, like to Max's point, it was easier for him to run since he already had some of those reestablished connections. And then it was just about like spidering out from there. And so I think just having a better progressive base that can help us help others in elections. So, you know, as we're running for state things, it also helps that at least in Burlington, we've got our network. People know, if people know who I am. So if I'm like, oh, I really like this candidate, that helps.
I just want to, this is Anthony again. I just want to, as someone who's weathered some of the ups and downs of the Progressive Party over the years, I must say that this has been one of the most inspiring elections I've experienced in a long time. And to see all this new energy, it's in some ways it's new energy, but it's doing the same old stuff in terms of the nitty gritty work of knocking on doors and whatnot. But also, ironically, dealing with the same issues that we've been dealing with all these times over time. But it's really inspiring to see young people, people of color, different kinds of Vermonters rising up and taking power. And, you know, we used to talk about how the Progressive Coalition started around Burlington, then spread around the state. Now we've been able to spread ourselves around the state, but it's really inspiring and really great to see this kind of new energy coming into Burlington again, once again, because I think it'll help inspire us as we move forward around the state as well. I mean, I just really want to congratulate you all. I mean, as somebody said, remember, you're just human beings, which I think is important to keep in mind. You're just human beings, but you're doing all the right stuff. And I think that, as Max said, being willing to stick with it through the good times and the bad times. We all know that political change is a long-term process. It took us a long time to get into the messes we're in. We have ingrained racism and ingrained inequality and whatnot. I think it's going to take us a while to set things right again. And I just really want to say how much I appreciate all you folks for doing the hard work you've done and getting yourselves elected. I really look forward to seeing your good work on the city councils. I really appreciate it.
I did see that Kit Andrews had her hand up. I don't know if we have time for one more quick question. Just gonna,
Wait a
unmute.
I gotta unmute myself. Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Max, for putting neoliberalism as the context and the lens right up front in your comments. It's a worldwide movement that's been killing us slowly for years, and I really appreciate that you put our mayor into that. So the question would be, so behind the question, I encourage all of our progressive leaders throughout the state to be aware of that. And so I just want to see if Zariah or Jane or I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name, Adan. Anyway, if any of you just have a comment to make on that.
So, sorry.
Did that
anyone want to respond to that?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Can you say the question again?
If you don't have an answer, it's like half encouragement and also half question. So the question is, are you thinking about your platform and your program and the things that you're most interested in doing in the context of neoliberalism, which is a worldwide movement very ably represented by Moreau and everything he stands for?
Do you want to go first?
You go first.
Oh God. There's a lot there for sure. So I'm just gonna simplify it a little bit, and then we can build off of it. I went into this extremely optimistically because there were so many progressive leaders, not just on council, but throughout Burlington and throughout the state, that I know that if I had to make a phone call and ask a question or something, that someone would be there for me. And I felt like incredibly supported with that kind of fundamental background going into this. And so I think that, yes, the agenda on the Moreau side of things differs from what we are focusing on. I don't think that it is anything to feel disheartened about. In fact, it keeps me going and it keeps me alert and it keeps me like doing my homework every day. And I think that it's a harmful agenda in many ways, but I think, and I think this is kind of agreed upon, our potential is like scaring people and it's in a good way. We're really kind of building out that capacity, but we're also trying to be a little bit self-critical and saying like, are we being inclusive enough throughout this process? Are we actually practicing what we preach? And so I think that us, having self-awareness as a party, that makes us, and I don't want to say, from a human point of view, who's better than another, but like it makes us a better group of people in terms of how we carry ourselves. And that was the main thing that I kept in mind throughout my campaign was how are we walking the walk every single day? And so, yeah, neoliberalism is, it's got a lot of tendrils in our society and our unfortunate systems that we function in. But I think we're starting to really name it, and we're starting to say like, hey, and I think that they're kind of feeling that pressure a little bit more boxed in, and not just because of our numbers, but because of the way that we present our ideas and the ideas that we're using to build the momentum. So it's kind of like a nice little roundabout way, but I can get to the nitty gritty. I don't know, Zerai, if you want to answer any of that.
I guess I want to the first economics course I took was taught by a communist, but I am like, for better or worse, still a classically trained economist, which in like the sense means neoliberal economics. And so and my job is also extremely neoliberal. And so I've both found this to be like a good avenue to like question like my own personal beliefs on a daily basis, but more importantly, it just makes me incredibly grateful for the counselors, that it's not like, if I had been maxed by myself for like years, I can't even imagine like how that would have changed me. Whereas I've got 6 other progressive counselors who are like, we're holding each other accountable every day, every week for how we talk about things, how we engage. And I find that to be an incredibly effective way to keep, like to Jane's point, that conversation to be like a better group of human beings, regardless of the paradigm or the world that we find ourselves in.
So thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that's time for this section. I do want to say, so Robert Millar just posted a donation link. If you're a regular attendant at these meetings, you know that we normally send around donation envelopes and encourage people to donate to the Progressive Party. So I'm going to resend that link right here. These successes, we were outspent like 3-1 in some cases. Huge amount of money was coming in from developers and big business interests to oppose like this whole slate of counselors and Adam. But we showed that even with with a little bit of money and a lot of hard work and a grassroots network, we're able to kind of overcome that. It does still take money, and we're gearing up for the 2020 elections right now. So I really hope people can consider making a donation to the Progressive Party to kind of continue to support our work and build for 2020 November elections.
I think it's also important to note again